So welcome back, guys. In the last episode of the podcast, we were speaking about the three levels in the spirituality as seen from Chinese metaphysics, as seen from acupuncture. So we were talking about the fact that spirituality, just like any other topic in acupuncture, is very, very detailed, very, very deeply understood, and very detailed structure, right? So it has a very, very detailed structure. So in the last part, we were talking about the first of these phases, and the first of these phases corresponds to the first four meridians, the four acupuncture channels, being spleen, stomach, and lungs and colon, right? And we were talking about the fact that they are linked as a group. Just as a quick reminder, right? If you haven't seen that video, you can check it in the description, and you'll find a link to the that video. So today we're going to talk about the next group, right? And the next group is made up of the next four meridians in the cycle, right? And these are the kidneys and the heart and the bladder and the small intestine. Basically, this is the water fire axis, right? So this is the essence of the whole spirituality. Now, what do I mean by that? In Chinese cosmogony, the idea is that we come to take form in this human body and to have this experience because we are here to learn some lessons and to understand something, and to really evolve through experiencing something. And for us to evolve, we need to manifest our potential. We have what is called a life curriculum, but just like in school, just because you have a curriculum, it doesn't mean that you actually learn the lessons. So you need to actually learn the lessons, right? And more than that, almost like in real life, you have the free will. You have the option of going along on that path, meaning you can choose to manifest this potential. You can choose to walk on the path that is laid in front of you by divinity or heaven or whatever you may call it, or you may not, right? You may choose to completely abandon that. You may choose to manifest your potential or completely walk away from it, right? But in Chinese cosmogony, this initial pact with divinity, what it does is that it actually says that divinity binds itself to keep us happy and fulfilled and full of harmony and full of abundance and what have you, right? Any kind of human desire, if or as long as we as human beings take it upon ourselves to actually walk on that path, right? It's as if divinity says, hey, it's like Hansel and Gretel, maybe the fairy tale, Hansel and Gretel, in which there's a trail of breadcrumbs in the woods, and Hansel and Gretel follow the trail of breadcrumbs. So what happens is that it's as if divinity has put down for us some path full of resources, right? Now, if we are on that path, we will find a lot of resources. Resources such as health, such as nice and fulfilling relationships, such as financial abundance. Everything will come to us naturally with minimal effort and with minimal friction, as long as we are willing to not stray from that path. The more we stray from that path, the more we encounter fewer resources, right? And life gets more difficult, right? It's like stepping away from the light. And if you step away from the light, what happens is that you're going to find that your health gets worse, your relationships are more challenging, and you may have various difficulties in life with your relationships, various kinds of relationships, all kinds of relationships, and of course the finances may be challenging as well. Now, this of course is hypothetical. For each and every person, we can see in their patru chart, that is the Chinese astrological chart, what exactly are their life lessons. And here is a link that I really want to make, because if we understand life from this perspective, we understand that the approach to health from Chinese metaphysics is not based on the fact that, you know, I'm starting from the point that there's a disease and I want to cure it. No. There's a much bigger picture that we're starting from, right? And the emphasis is not so much on the idea that, you know, we are trying to solve a problem. The emphasis is much more on understanding. Because if we have the right understanding, then everything falls into place. And this is where the understanding about health falls into place. Because, you see, in Chinese medicine, right, health is not only seen as just the physical part of health. It's also the mental and the emotional and the spiritual part of health. Now, we've discussed this in other videos. I just want to point out that in order to truly be healthy, you need to be fulfilled on all levels. Because if you're okay physically, but you're really suffering emotionally, you're not healthy. Your physical structure might be healthy for now, but actually longer term, if you are suffering emotionally, you will at some point, sooner or later, develop some physical problems as well. So that of course becomes problematic. But even more bigger picture approach, there is a deeper layer to that, and this is the spiritual layer, I would call, right? And the spiritual layer, and this is important because this is where it relates to what we're going to discuss in today's episode, is that health is very much related to being on one's path. Now, this sounds maybe very, you know, hypothetical, philosophical, and so on and so forth. Let me just give you a few examples to show you how I've seen this time and again in my clinical practice. So, for example, the idea is that we can have some diseases which are very easy to link to this spiritual, how to say, lack of fulfillment, right? And autoimmune diseases are some of them. Migraines are another. Stomach, liver, gallbladder problems are another. Because all of these, what they have in common is a sort of rejection, is a sort of very deep frustration, very deep unease with the state of affairs in our lives. And the strongest source, the most profound source of inner turmoil that I've found is the inner turmoil, the inner conflict of feeling that you're not living your life. You're not living the potential that is in you. You're not where you want to be. You're not doing the things that you want to do. You're doing the things that you might need to be doing, right, in order to, I don't know, let's say vocational, if we choose this path, you might be choosing to do the things that you need to pay bills, to pay your mortgage, to pay your groceries, to pay your rent, or what have you, right? So you have a job, but you don't have a vocation, right? You do whatever you do for 8, 9, 10 hours a day, not because you like it, but because it serves a clear purpose. But if you weren't paid for it, maybe if you weren't paid very handsomely for it, you wouldn't do it because you actually don't like it. And that kind of resentment is not only the fact that, you know, you're doing something that you don't want to be doing. It's also from the fact that you are wasting time not doing the things you want to do, the things that truly have a deep potential to give you satisfaction, to feel that you're in the right place. When people feel that they are in the right place, they feel at peace. They feel incredible. There's a soothing, calming, peaceful energy to it that is so distinctive. I've seen that time and again. But better still, I've actually helped people get there. And this is what this second group of meridians tries to achieve, right? So let's recap a little bit how the first and the second come together. The first group of meridians starts from the fact that you may not even know you have a problem. Or even if you do think you know you have a problem, you don't actually realize just how big that problem is. Why is that? Because the journey of the first group of meridians, what it aims to do is to actually help you understand that you have the power. You have the power to be independent. You have the power to be stable on your own 2 feet. You have the power to survive independent from other people's opinions, right? Therefore, you have the power to say no. Right? Why don't we say no, usually? For a number of reasons. One, we don't feel we're secure enough. We don't feel we're stable enough. So then we choose to avoid conflict. And we see that from the, individual level up to country geopolitics level. Yeah, we try to avoid standing up to, might be aggressors. We try to avoid to take a stand. We try to avoid to, upset various people in our lives. Why? Because we find ourselves being insecure, anxious, feeling unstable and all that. The problem is that if this is a state of fact of, day-to-day living, then what happens is that there will be growing unease and frustration, which you might not even actually feel because it might be so deeply repressed because there's simply too much anger there, too much anxiety and fear there, right? So any form of even feeling the frustration might be repressed. And there you go after that a little bit higher on this ladder, and then maybe the fear is not so great. Maybe the courage is a little bit bigger, right? And then maybe you feel frustrated, but maybe you still lack the power to actually stand up for yourself. Or maybe you stand up for yourself in some circumstances, but not in others, right? As you grow and grow and grow, and you go through all these phases, and you become much more independent and stable, you will be much more driven not by anxiety or fear. You will not be driven so much by the fear of, oh my God, if this person is not going to like me anymore, or if I'm going to lose all my friends, what am I going to do? So it's not going to be so much about this. It's going to be much more about authenticity. It's going to be so much more about, making sure that whatever happens in your life, whatever you live, whatever you experience, whatever dynamics you have at home, in your relationship with your partner, in your relationship with your children, in your relationship with your friends, in your relationship at work, in all domains of life, is that aligned to my values and beliefs or not? And once you reach this level, and there's a gradient, right? You go into this second group, because you see, it sounds very nice to think, oh, I have the power, I'm strong now, I'm really gonna do whatever I want. But wait a minute, what do I want? And this is the subject of the second group, right? So how does a person feel when they're transitioning to this second group? They feel much more self-assured. They feel much more certain on their power to be who they are. They feel much more self-assured to take a stance, to stand up for what they believe in, to say no if they don't agree with something, to let go of relationships that are not aligned with their values. But the puzzle is pretty far from being complete, because this is where it pretty much stops. Because there is a tendency to say no, but if I'm going to say no to something, I want to put something in its place, right? So if I'm gonna, and this is what actually happens in practice, right? If someone gradually realizes, hey, I have a tendency to have a lot of toxic relationships in my life, right? So I'm gonna start to renegotiate these relationships, or actually, just discontinue those relationships altogether. So what can I expect? The idea is that one would have the presumption that if I know that I don't want that, automatically I will know what I want. That doesn't happen, actually, right? It will, in this journey from A to B, 90% of the journey will be, I don't want this anymore, I don't want this anymore, I don't want this anymore, I don't want this anymore. Only the last 10% are going to be about, yes, I know I want that, right? So only the last 10% of this journey are going to be about clarifying exactly what I want. But this journey can be divided into, let's say, 2 halves. In the first half of the journey, it's about gaining the courage to say no. In the second part, it's not so much about gaining courage, because I've done that in the first part. In the second part, it's more about clarity. And this is where these 4 meridians come into play. So, what do they actually do? We have the heart and the small intestine, and these 2 relate to the fire element, and fire relates to clarity. Fire relates to awareness. Fire relates to being in the moment. Fire relates to switching on the light, and because there is light, now you can finally see. So awareness and presence, these are the key qualities of the fire element. And then on the other hand, you have the water element, and water element is related to potential, to mission, to our life curriculum, right? When we were saying earlier that heaven instills in us this curriculum, this potential, this divine mission, if you will, it's the water element that stores it. And it's also interesting from a dynamic of how the elements interact with one another, because you see, the metal element is the one responsible for connection with divinity. That's the element that inspires us and establishes our bearings, and that is the basis for the water element, because in metaphysics, in Chinese metaphysics, the metal element creates the water element, right? So the connection with divinity creates the basis for us to receive the divine email with, this is your life curriculum, this is your potential, this is who you are, okay? Now, of course, you might be thinking about, if we have this dimension of astrology, right, Chinese astrology, and we can see all that in the life, we can see the life curriculum in the astrological chart. Why don't we just shorten the process by going to someone who does a reading, and we get a reading for our Bazi chart, and we've just received all the information we need, right? Well, it doesn't function like that, because yes, you're right, theoretically, rationally, cognitively, you would receive all that information, but that's the fact with spirituality, it's not cognitive, right? Okay, the mind is one of the levels of the human being. It's important for us to understand what is there. Of course, that's the whole richness of what patru does, right? It gives you an understanding of who you are and what you should be doing. But the real magic happens when something switches in you and you feel it, right? Because let's say, you come to me for a reading and I say, well, your set of skills would incline you to manifest your mission in these circumstances, and you need to consider this and that, right? And you might be thinking, okay, I hear that you're telling me to go in that direction, but I really don't feel it. I don't really feel attracted to that. Or maybe I feel some attraction to that, but I have difficulty implementing that. I don't really feel that that's for me. At least not at this moment in my life, right? And that would be pretty much where the conversation ends, because, more than telling you what's in your chart and explaining that to you, it's up to you to live it, right? That's the whole challenge in this, right? Well, not the whole challenge, but the first challenge is to understand what you need to live. The second is to actually decide that you are going to live it, right? So this is where karmic acupuncture comes into play, because we can see in the patru chart, right, what obstacles exactly you have in living out your life, right? What is it that keeps you back, that stops you from actually manifesting that? And we can address that through acupuncture, right? And what happens after karmic acupuncture? You actually feel much more drawn to manifest your potential, because what karmic acupuncture does, it triggers those switches in you that you need to feel that is your calling. And why do we feel that that's not our calling? Well, what I'm describing here in discovering your calling is pretty much like the hero's journey, right? The hero's journey you might find in any book, any story, any movie, anything like that. Every story has its hero, and any story, any good story at least, has a hero that on his journey he will face challenges, he will face difficulties, right? I don't know, take Shrek for example, right? Or take any kind of Prince Charming going to save the princess story, right? It's not going to just go to the castle, take the princess by the hand and, go home, and that's the story. That would be a very boring story. That hero needs to undergo some changes. That hero needs to grow. That hero needs to actually die, metaphorically speaking, sometimes physically speaking in the story, and be reborn. Because basically the work to be done for him to get what he or she wants is this rebirth. And this rebirth we see in therapy as well. And the difference is that therapy really accelerates this growth process, this self-development process. So what do you gain by this? Well, you gain a lot of self-development. You gain a lot of resources, emotional resources that acupuncture activates in you, so that you can feel a lot more self-love, a lot more self-worth, right? So basically when you look in the mirror, you think, actually, you're really looking great. You're a really wonderful person. Feel pride instead of criticism when you look in the mirror, right? Now, I'm not talking about narcissistic pride, but I'm talking about, a sense of self-worth that is empowering to you. So this is where acupuncture comes in and really helps you to manifest these things and overcome all these obstacles by facilitating the changes and the realizations and the overcoming of internal obstacles like childhood traumas and stuff like that, so that you truly manifest your path, your mission, your potential, and you truly start to live more in your identity. Before we move on and I explain you a little bit more technical stuff about these meridians, I want to share with you a story that most often comes to my mind when I talk about the huge importance of being on one's path, and actually not only the importance of being on one's path, but also the timing. is it ever too late? Maybe you feel that it's too late, right? Maybe, I don't know, you're in your second half of the human life, and you feel, well, you know, this information could have been very useful for me had I received it 10, 20, 30 years ago, but now it's a little bit late for me, right? It's never too late. It is never too late. I want to share with you a story about one of my acupuncture students. So this was happening a number of years back. Her name was Adriana, and she started learning acupuncture with me at the age of 58. So she was 58 years old when she discovered the this whole world of acupuncture and Chinese metaphysics, and she was absolutely amazed by it. She found it incredibly fascinating. She came also as a patient, and she had an enormous amount of you know, health problems, physical health problems, for which she would be taking a whole load of pills. And gradually, as she went through therapy, one by one, these symptoms diminished or disappeared altogether, and the number of pills that she required also disappeared. During all this time, she was studying acupuncture with me. So, about 2 years later, at the age of 60, she quit her job because, well, she actually retired, right? She used to work as an industrial chemist. So she'd been working in this field for all her career, all her life. She hated every bit of it, but it paid the bills. So, you know, with an unhappy relationship with her husband, and with needing to support the family financially, she needed to do this. That's what she knew to do, and that's what paid the bills. But at the age of 60, and after 2 years of learning acupuncture, she decided that she's going to start a part-time practice. Initially only on friends and relatives and based on donations and stuff like that. But it really started taking off. And the moment she came to truly embrace what was obviously her vocation, which she loved to do, whether she received money for it or not, also came with the giving up of doing what she felt that had all her life been a pressure, meaning her job, which she hated. Her life transformed yet again, and I really enjoyed seeing an incredible amount of blossoming in this 60-year-old woman who had changed her life at a stage in life in which most people don't think about changes anymore. In the following, I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 years, she continued to grow. She continued to develop her practice. She continued to be a patient and to improve her health-wise and stuff like that. And she could obviously, anyone who would see her would be touched by her passion of how she would be talking about all the things that she was doing, and it was so clear that she was so much happier than she'd been all her life. And then at some point she developed a deadly affliction, which by the time when this happened, this was diagnosed. This was a surgical problem. It was called dissection of the aorta. Basically, the aorta, which is the main artery in the human body, had actually developed a fissure, and unfortunately, it was unsolvable through surgery, and it was deadly. So she knew that she had hours left when she got to the hospital. Hours left to live. And I was lucky enough to get the feeling of how she was, knowing that she was going to die, and knowing that, you know, of course she didn't plan on dying, now that she'd found all this path of hers, which she was getting a lot of satisfaction from. So, you know, she would be envisaging, you know, another 10, 15, 20 years perhaps of living in which she would refine her understanding of this branch of Chinese metaphysics which she discovered. And of course, by that, up until that point, she would have been telling me again and again how much she regretted that she hadn't found this opportunity earlier. Well, guess what? In the hours before her death, she was completely at peace. And she felt that there's no injustice here. There's no sorrow here. There's no sadness here for the fact that she is going to die shortly after she'd found her life's mission and her source of satisfaction and fulfillment. Because you see, and this is what Chinese metaphysics kind of hints to us, time matters less when you're on your path. So of course, when you're not on your path, time seems to matter a lot. You might be, I don't know, maybe 40 years old and anxious that you're going to die, anxious that you're going to contract some form of disease. And this is very typical of hypochondriacs. They fear all kinds of disease. Oh my God, what if that's going to happen? What if that's going to happen? What if I have this or that disease? This is actually fear of death, right? And fear of death is fear of life that is unlived. Fear of the fact that I am viscerally aware of the fact that time is ticking. My hourglass has its sand coming down and it's not going to go up again, and I know that my days on this earth are finite and diminishing, and I fear death. Now you might be thinking, well, everybody here fears death. No, actually no. If you talk to any elderly person who has largely lived their life as they intended to, you will find that in most cases they are fine to die. They don't regret dying, and they feel that it is their time to go, and there's no fight there, right? When is there a fight? There is a fight when you didn't get to live the life that you actually chose, right? That you chose. You didn't get to live the life that was meant for you. You didn't get to manifest your full potential. That's when you fear death. There's an African saying that goes like this: make sure that when death comes for you, it finds you alive. Because you see, this is what people don't understand, and this is where the distinction between the first group of meridians and the second group of meridians comes in. When you're still in the first group, you still might want to, to feel that, yes, I want to find my path, I want to find meaning in what I do, and I want to do that. But if you don't have the courage to stand up for yourself, you can't do it. Because striking a pose, setting out that this is what you want to do, this is your path, this is what you believe in, anything you might be saying to any degree of specificity will get other people's opinions against you, right? not everyone, but certainly some people will be against you, right? So therefore, if you hate conflict, if you are conflict avoidant, you will try to avoid being too specific, and you will try to appease everyone. And of course, by appeasing everyone, you won't be appeasing anyone truly, and least of all, you won't be appeasing yourself. You won't be living your life, right? But if you choose to live your life fully, if you choose to truly go 100% on your life path, then that's the key to satisfaction. But that entails having the courage. So that's where the basis from the first group comes in. The magic of the second group is it gives you clarity, right? Now, how does it do that? Well, treatment on the heart gives you awareness and presence, and you become more aware. Stop. Treatment on the kidneys puts emphasis on connecting yourself with your life potential. Now, of course, when I say treatment on, right, what I mean is that these acupuncture channels have specific points on them. And maybe sometime in the future we'll be talking about these specific points. Like, for example, right, I'll just give you some acupuncture point names so that you understand that from their very inception, from their very discovery, thousands of years ago, as in more than 2 millennia ago, the Chinese actually imbued the meaning of these acupuncture points through their names, right? So, for example, kidney 4, the fourth point on the kidney channel, is called Great Bell. Now, why is it called Great Bell? Because it's like ringing a bell that wakes you up. Wakes you up to what? It wakes you up to your potential. It wakes you up to who you are. It wakes you up to your identity, right? I'll give you another name. Heart 4, one of my favorite points. Heart 4 is called Spirit Path. Now, how much more clear than that do you get? Spirit Path, the path of your spirit. Again, it wakes you up to who you are, to what matters to you most. And then, of course, we have the small intestine and the bladder. And the small intestine is more to do with understanding what is important and what is not. And the bladder is more related to managing resources in your life, right? So once you understood who you are and what your path is, what your identity is, then what really matters is how do you manage the resources that you have? Time, money, everything, right? Energy and so on, so that you devise a path, a journey, taking into account that you're human, you only have 24 hours in a day, you only have so much resources, and because you have finite resources, what is the best way to allot them? What is the best way to see them? So this is what we talk about when we talk about the second group, right? It gives you a whole lot of clarity, so that the power that you've developed in the first group and the independence from there is actually focused on manifesting what you discover in the second group. So, and then we have the third group, and we're going to talk about the third group in the podcast episode of next week. And the third group is about implementation, right? So the first two groups, the first two realms, if you will, are internal, right? They are about the internal changes, the developing the internal resources necessary for this spiritual journey, and not necessarily just necessary for the spiritual journeys. They are together the biggest part of the spiritual journey of becoming. And then we have the third group, which has to do with how do you actually implement this in your day-to-day life, right? And it has to do with planning and decisions and relationships. So all that we're going to discuss in part 3 of the spirituality series in this podcast. So stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next session.